Hello, everyone's Forest Focus. As one Nottingham Forest player signs a new contract, there's a major breakthrough in the expansion of the City Ground plan. We'll also talk Elliot Anderson and the latest transfer news in the company of, first of all, Emily Anderson. Emily, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Very good, thank you. Nice to be with you again in the same week.
Yes, we'll make the most of it. We'll make the most of your availability by having you on for the second time this week. Good to have you with us. Pete Blackburn, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Just about recovered from the chaos and carnage of the quiz recording last night, which will be, I guess, available for people to watch soon. So I think it's worthwhile, even if it is a bit of a mess.
Yeah, it should be out tomorrow. I mean, normally I aim to put pre-recorded things out at 7 a.m. I might still be editing it at 11:59 p.m. tomorrow. It needs a little bit of tweaking, but it was a lot of fun. So yeah, check that out tomorrow. Check out as well. What should we check out? At the end of this, that's what I was going to say. We'll chat, and then after this, we finish chatting. There'll be an interview with Forest fan and author Rebecca Watson, who Pete knows well. Had a chat with her last week about her work and being a Forest fan. So do check that out. And also, we'll get a word in pretty early on for our live show. Just a reminder, you can get your tickets now. Go to gigantic.com. It's on the 25th of July. All the podcast regulars are there except for Mark and Emily, who is unavailable, sadly. But Kelvin will be on stage. Lewis will be on stage. Tickets are only a £5, so it will be a good night, I'm sure. Right, let's start with the news that Willy Boly has signed a one-year contract extension. He's accepted the offer, which seems good business to me. The only other bit of contract news that I saw was that Callum Hudson-Odoi has been linked with Manchester United, but we won't really pursue that too much unless anything becomes concrete. The piece in the Sun also said Forest have started contract talks with him, which I really hope they started that a while ago personally. But Emily, Willy Boly, good news that he's staying?
Yeah, really good news. He's a great servant for the club, isn't he? He's obviously not a regular first teamer. He's a fantastic squad player, oozes experience. And from what Harry Toffolo said to you the other day, he's one of the grown-ups in the dressing room, keeps everyone level-headed, G's everyone on. And I'm sure he's a great person to have within the squad. So delighted that he's been given an extra year. And you can always rely on him, can't you? He's not going to be fancy pants like Murillo, but you can always rely on him to kick the ball to safety and be a really safe person in that back four. So absolutely delighted for him and glad he's going to be part of our European journey.
Lovely stuff. And unless Pete's going to say it's a terrible idea and interject, we'll move on and discuss the City Ground plans. Reports and public announcements yesterday that the development of the City Ground will be discussed at Rushcliffe Borough Council Planning Committee on June 26th. So that's a week today, actually. The council are willing to accept it. Pete will elaborate on all this, but the plan would be to redevelop and rebuild the Peter Taylor stand, take the capacity to 35,000 or a shade over. Pete's read more of the documents than I have. I've read all the Section 106 stuff, or some of it, which is around what Forest will pay back in terms of giving to the community, and there's some substantial stuff in there. They're really making a big contribution to be a part of this whole plan. But I'll throw it over to Pete. He's going to talk through what he's read and what he makes of it.
Well, I think we have to take this as positive news for those of us who are heavily invested in staying at the City Ground. It will be no surprise to anyone that I'm one of those people. I think in the not too recent past, there was genuine chance that we might not have a future at the City Ground, and that the sort of stumbling blocks that the club were finding, or the relationships that were strained and such like, were leading us to looking elsewhere for a new home. So from that basis, if you've got the same mindset as me or anything like my mindset, then I think this is great news. Essentially, the situation that we're at now is, in some senses, actually no further than we were in technically in, I think, 2022, when the planning application was approved last time round. The problem is that a lot of time has elapsed because there have been so many stumbling blocks in the way, issues around the development of flats that the club is intending to build on the land, issues with the Britannia Boathouse, which needs to be demolished for some of the plans to go ahead, various other things around the Section 106 agreement that you mentioned, which is essentially what Forest will contribute to the community as a result of the development, which is the same sort of process that any developer would go through. If you have a housing development near where you live, you generally expect that developer to contribute to primary care, say, or local schooling and that sort of thing. So those are the sorts of stumbling blocks that they've had. It's been very, very delayed, and as a result, the planning application, as I understand it, will be running out soon. The permission that they were granted last time round, and the council also believe that the right thing to do is to go through all the legal processes again now, so that they can approve the plan, which is ostensibly the same as it was last time round. The plans for the actual development of the ground are a 10,000-seater Peter Taylor stand, heavily revamped, including massive improvement in the commercial areas. And the planning application talks about one of the corporate boxes being a 1,200 capacity. So I think we'll be seeing pretty big developments. It also includes club shop, all sorts of offices and that sort of stuff. So big developments, but ostensibly the same as last time. The changes really have come to the proposal for building flats next to the ground, which is around the boathouse and where the sort of waterfront bar and that sort of stuff is now. Those plans have been scaled back slightly. They've also removed, the club previously had decided that they felt that one development couldn't go ahead without the other, and I guess that's largely an economic thing in terms of the money coming in from the development of flats in order to build the stand. That link's now been removed, so the stand can be built first. The plaza around it, which will include the sort of access areas for people living in the new flats and such like, that can all be built before the flats are, and that's a big help to the process going ahead, because obviously the more parts to the process, the more complicated it gets. So I think we can be pretty positive about where we are right now. The approval is going to be given at the next planning committee unless something very odd happens. Generally speaking, the council officers recommend approval, and then that is what happens. There are a few objections and such like that you can see if you go and have a look at the planning application, the sorts of things that you would expect normally. But as things stand, it looks like Nottingham Forest are committing to the City Ground being our future home, us remaining on the banks of the Trent. And if you feel any way like I do about the emotional tie with that place, with our football club and our families and our friends, then it's brilliant news. I think the only potential hitch, as I see it right now, is that it looks like from the planning documents, the Britannia Boat Club, which is the one that has to be demolished of the three on the Trent, is going to have to be rebuilt elsewhere. All of those facilities will have to be provided before the club can do anything. And the planning documents talk about the development of the ground happening within the next year. That's a lot of work still to do, I think. So, little caveat that there are always still going to be hurdles to go, but I think we can take this as a statement of intent and hopefully a step in the right direction, certainly from my point of view.
Yeah, it certainly sounds it. I know a few people, I think someone tagged me on Twitter as well saying, is all this worth it for 5,000 extra seats? But it's the commercial income that it is primary to this. When you look at our commercial income relative to other clubs in the Premier League, especially the ones we want to compete with, we're behind them. So this is a big phase of it. And the other thing I was going to say, Pete, from reporting, I think in The Athletic, I was reading Danny Taylor's piece. I guess phase 2 of this is to do the Bridgeford end as well, isn't it, in time?
Well, that was always the plan. I think it was 2019, if I'm right, when the very first planning proposals were drawn up and discussed. And at that point, the plan was that the Peter Taylor stand would be done first, and then there would be an extension of the Bridgeford end, which I guess the idea is that currently there's a sort of big gap there, isn't there? And you can fill that gap in and provide a lot more seats. And that initially, I think the club's hope was that you could take the capacity of the City Ground to nearly 40,000. So I think there are still options. Again, loads of hurdles. It's complicated. Obviously, there's lots of housing behind there. There's an enormous amount of work to be done to get any sort of progress on this sort of stuff. And I know that some of us have been critical in the past or have been demanding because we're desperate to stay there. So I do appreciate that this is hard. It's complicated stuff. But I think the really important thing is it is more seats, and to trifle at 5,000 more seats, I think is pretty ridiculous. That's 5,000 more people who can go to home games, cheer the lads on. And how many more families is that who haven't been able to attend games, who maybe have only been able to get to the odd cup game? I think if you're saying, is it worth it for 5,000 more people to go to games, then I'm not sure about that perspective personally. I think that's a big number. But the point is, it's also a step along the journey, and it's a commitment to where we are right now. And there's more that can be done. And it's not just about the numbers of seats, as you say. It's about the commercial side of things. It's about the look of the place. It's about how it feels for players. It's about what we can attract. It's about how we feel when we're in there. I think we all know that as much as we love that place, some of it's an absolute shambles, isn't it? We've talked plenty of times about the cliched stuff around the running water and stuff. I mean, it's a bit ridiculous to call that cliche, really, because that is, incredibly poor. But there's a lot of work to do. But this is a commitment that we're on that road.
Good stuff. Right, Pete's been our City Ground correspondent. Unless Emily wants to weigh in, she's our England Under-21s correspondent, and we'll move on to Elliot Anderson. You've watched have you watched all the Under-21s games?
Yeah, just the England ones. I've watched the 3 England games, and I mean, you probably want to ask me a question, but I'll just very briefly say that Elliot Anderson has been the heartbeat of every game, I think. But yeah.
So my question was going to be, I haven't seen them. I saw they played last night. We were recording the quiz, as mentioned earlier, and I saw Henry Winter on Twitter say he was taken off after 60 minutes, I think, looking tired. And the only question I had from it is the balance of getting a rest versus playing tournament football, because we signed him from Newcastle. He missed a lot of football through injury. He hadn't even played that much football. He comes into our team and he's one of the first names on the team sheet, and he did often get hooked before 90 minutes for whatever reason, but I don't know if just energy levels were one of them. So I suppose the question I was going to ask you, Emily, from what you've seen is, do you feel there's more benefit in him playing in a big summer international tournament, or would he benefit from a rest and being fully charged for pre-season from what you've seen?
Knowing what he's like and what he gives to every game, he seems to me like a real 100% guy. You're never going to get 70-80% from Elliot Anderson, no matter what game he's playing in, whether it's a friendly, whether it's tournament football, whether it's the Premier League. You can guarantee he'll be that box-to-box midfielder controlling the action, which is exactly what he's done in those 3 England games. His name keeps cropping up, and he did get pulled last night after 60-odd minutes, and I do think it was probably a bit of tiredness coming in, but I wouldn't read too much into that. Harvey Elliott was pulled at half-time in the game last night as well. It looked hot and sticky and humid out there, so that's probably not helping. And I personally think with the age that he is, with the kind of player that he is, he just loves to play football, and possibly maybe the rest isn't something that he'd want. I think he enjoys playing with the England setup, and he's openly said, hasn't he, that he'd quite like to be considered for the World Cup squad for the main England team, and it's something that potentially he could achieve. And I think last night and the other 2 games that I watched, you could really see the influence he has in that under-21 squad. He's arguably one of the best players on the pitch every time he plays for the under-21s. And it's just great to see him develop, because when he came to Forest, we didn't really know what we were going to get, and we knew he had his injury problems at Newcastle, and very quickly he's becoming one of those mainstays for Forest, and looking like it for England as well, and hopefully he can make that step up to the men's. I didn't see any issue with him being dragged at 60-odd minutes last night. To me, it felt like potentially a bit of fatigue, but nothing overly worrying.
What have you made, if you've paid much attention to the other players or just watched Elliot? What have you made of Harvey Elliott and James McAtee, if you've seen them? 2 players who've been linked with us to various degrees.
Harvey Elliott's another one that you can see he could fit into any Premier League side, and unfortunately he can't quite break through into the Liverpool side because of I guess, the quality they've got in their squad. But he's a player that you could see really fitting into our team. He's primarily a right winger, isn't he? But he can play down the middle as well. And McAtee started as sub last night, actually. He didn't come on till half-time. He's another one of these players that you could see him being maybe understudy to Morgan Gibbs-White, or even maybe potentially moving into that slot as and when Morgan Gibbs-White moves on. I would take either of those at the City Ground. They've got exactly what we want, both homegrown talent, both young, both very versatile, both look very coachable, good attitudes, work really hard. So yeah, they'd both be great signings if we could ever get hold of them.
Lovely stuff. We shall move on to a bit of transfer chat, but just before that, a quick word for the Trent Navigation. A reminder, it's Saturday the 28th of June, 2 till 10, a day gig into a night gig. It's Sainsbury's Festival of Love with Alex P headlining his Ibethan revival. Get your tickets from gigantic.com now. Do it while you buy our live show tickets if you want. That'd be lovely. Right. Pete, did you want to weigh in on the under-21s at all, or should we just move on to transfer stuff?
Not on the under-21 specifically. I've not watched any of the games, but I mean, I'm not surprised by the reports Emily's giving us and other people have given us about Elliot Anderson, because I think that they go without. I don't want to be too hyperbolic, but I think the guy is, potential phenomenon. To be honest, I really do think he's got pretty much everything to be a complete midfielder. Hopefully for us for a fair old time and possibly on really, really big stages in the future. I think in history, that signing, him being essentially costing us £15 million, will go down as being one of the most impressive bits of business that you can bring to mind. To be honest, I think the sky's the limit. And there's a previous pod where you guys, and I think Emily was one of you, were talking about breakout stars of next season. I mean, Elliot Anderson's sort of already done it, but I think he's going to do it again and some. So, I mean, what a player and a real treat that he's one of ours.
Yeah, definitely. We shall move on to transfers. We've been linked with a couple of Brazilian strikers, which I thought were worth talking about, especially the first one I'll mention, who's, I'm probably going to say this wrong, Kaio Jorge, plays for Cruzeiro. He's a striker, 23 years old. He's had an interesting career. He had a big move to Juventus a few years ago, and it was a bit of a nightmare for him. Never really worked out in 2 years. So he returned to his homeland to play for Cruzeiro, and this season he's really exploded. He's got 8 goals in 11 games so far in Brazil's top flight. I messaged Nathan about him, Nathan Joyce from Copper Club, just to try and I think I asked him how he stood up in comparison to Igor Jesus, who looks like he's going to sign for us. And he'd already tweeted that he was really excited about this one. He's a very different type of player, a natural goal scorer. And interestingly, he's arguably closest to the Brazilian national team than Igor Jesus is. Currently, obviously, Igor Jesus has got the cap. Kaio Jorge hasn't, but I watched the video. Nathan said you'll enjoy watching his clips, so I did watch one this morning. I sent it to the other guys, and I did enjoy watching it. He does look a natural goal scorer. There was some really good instinctive strikers play in there, and some link-up play. All disclaimers around YouTube clips and everything like that. But is it an interesting one for you, Emily? I should say as well, one of the things to Emily, he's linked to Bayer Leverkusen and Bayern Munich. Reports saying that Bayern Munich are looking for a new deputy to Harry Kane, and he's on their list. So there's a lot of context there. And then, Emily, what do you think about him?
But yeah, everything you've just said, that's a great write-up, isn't it? And I watched the YouTube clip that you sent me this morning, and yeah, it looks great with a fantastic soundtrack in the background. But I'm always really nervous about these YouTube compilations because we've had our fingers burnt many a time over the years, haven't we, when we've been promised a super striker and they turn up to be a bit of a dud. But having said that, I have to say, honestly, first time I've heard of this guy was when you sent me the details this morning. But if you look at those stats again, it looks like the sort of player that we'd be into, a player that's very young, clearly knows where the goal is, and the fact that Bayer Leverkusen and Bayern Munich are also interested in him shows that he's got something going. Obviously, he's got the Brazilian link as well, so that will fit in very well with our squad. We really have captured the South American market, haven't we? And we tend to pick out these incredible talents like Murillo, to name but one. So yeah, I mean, he, on paper he looks great, but the only time I've seen him is on YouTube and what you've told me, Matt. But yeah, he looks fab to me.
He does fit the MO, Pete, in the sense that he's a bit older. He's actually had that move and had his fingers burned, and maybe that's put other clubs off. And now we're looking, and obviously, as mentioned, he seems to be attracting the interest of other clubs. So, I'll ask for your take on it. I know you'll give the usual disclaimer that me and Emily did as well about YouTube, but just your thoughts on what the little bit we've garnered on him.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the disclaimer is that we haven't really got a clue, have we? But as you say, I think everything that Nathan says and that you say sort of stands up from what I've seen. He looks like a real finisher, both feet as well, which is always quite nice to see. And also not just a penalty box striker. I mean, looks like he's got he's got the movement in the box in the way that perhaps Chris Wood has, in a different style. But he's someone who can find the space, and his finishing is good. But also, he looks like he likes to shoot from distance and is pretty good at that as well. So, I mean, there's clearly promise there. Looks like a talented player. Incredibly hard to know how it transfers. I haven't got any in-depth scouting or analysis. But like you say, the profile makes sense. I think we've talked about this so many times, but I think the market for us to be shopping in is the one where you can find someone who perhaps it hasn't all come together for yet, but you can see that the talent there's the potential there. You're either going early on them, or perhaps, like you say, in this case, they've had a go in Juventus. I mean, the pressure of going there for a big move must be enormous. So I don't think not succeeding at a young age, I don't know whether it was 20 or so there, I don't think that rules anything out in terms of your future success. But 23, I think he is now. It's the sort of thing that you can see Forest doing, and I think you can. Well, I feel like I can trust that they've got a good eye for it. I mean, no major conclusions from me, but he looks like the sort of player I wouldn't be desperately surprised to see us going forward.
The reported fee is about, I think it was 25 million euros, it's about 22 million quid, so a little bit more than Igor Jesus, if that one comes off. We'll just mention the other one that was linked. This was in Turkish media because he plays in Turkey. Turkish media is like the Wild West, so I don't ever get too giddy about it, but we'll mention it because it's been going around. Romulo Cardoso plays for Göztepe. I'm not sure how you say it. My Turkish is pretty terrible, obviously. He is also 23. He scored 13 goals in 29 games in the Turkish top flight. Last season, his quote fee is about 10 million, so it's lower, linked with Wolves and RB Leipzig, and he reported he's quite keen on a move to the Bundesliga. I won't ask these guys about him unless they've got an opinion, but I did watch a video of him as well, and he's a very different type of player from all the ones we've been linked with from what I've seen. Lots of flair, lots of skill, very selfless, looks to create goals and score them. The only reservation I saw from the one video I saw, the goals he scored are not tap-ins. They're quite low percentage, a few of them, which makes me wonder if it's easy to produce in the Premier League, reproduce against top defenders. But he does look to have a creative spark and something different. So I suppose the question I would ask Emily is, looks like we're signing Igor Jesus. We've got Chris Wood. We can sort of discount Taiwo from the equation for now. If we are signing a striker, is it too much of a gamble to go for another Brazilian or anyone who has no Premier League experience for you? Is that pushing it a step too far if Igor Jesus is coming? Or do we discount it because these players could be of such quality that you've got to go for it again?
Well, it's a really difficult question, isn't it? Because yes, in an ideal world, you want to sign someone with Premier League experience, someone that can bang the goals in the top flight. But then, who's available to us? We all had our hearts set on Liam Delap. Obviously, he's gone elsewhere. God, it's who knows? I think that hopefully Igor Jesus can sign for us and then get off to a really flying start. Hopefully Chris Wood's still got at least another season in him, banging in the goals. And I think in an ideal world you'd want a proven Premier League striker, but as we know, finding that it's like gold dust, isn't it?
Pete, any final observations, anything you want to say about transfers or final thoughts? Because I think we've covered everything today before we throw it to the conversation I had with Rebecca. Anything you want to add?
Well, the first thing on Romulo is that he needs to work out who's making the YouTube videos for him, because the one that I saw was I think the first three moments of it were him hitting the bar and skying 2 volleys over into the stand.
You watched a different one to me, but yeah, not the best.
Pete, that's how selfless he is. That is
Yeah.
how selfless he is. He's like, look, I'm just going to show you everything.
Maybe just giving the fans a ball to take home with them or something. So he needs to work on that and get on his agent to sort it out. I think the only other thing I'd say is on the chat about a proven striker and such like. I'm really not convinced that that's really a market that we can operate in, to be honest, unless you find someone like a Liam Delap who's got a release clause that is fortunate and you can get in there. I just think you're struggling really. And ultimately what we need isn't someone who's done it somewhere else necessarily, but someone who's going to do it for us. We're a different club. will play differently to lots of other teams. Even buying someone who's scored in the Premier League before doesn't necessarily guarantee that they're going to do it for you. It's obviously harder. I'm sure it's harder recruiting someone from Brazil than it is someone who you've seen playing in the Premier League before. But I think the fact that we're a smaller club than those that we're seeking to move ahead of in the league, in terms of all of the structures we've got, the finance, everything we talked about before in terms of how PSR in football means that the odds are stacked against you. It means we have to be smarter, and we have to make these signings before someone else does it. We have to make it before they've proven themselves, and we have to trust ourselves to do that. And that will mean getting some wrong, and it will mean us not getting on the back of the recruitment team or the management or the owner or whatever when some do go wrong. But if you can get more wrong than you can get right, then that's where the value is. That's where the future for us as a football club is, I think. So I personally, I wouldn't be concerned about where they come from. I just trust that the people doing the business have got faith that they can translate and their ability can translate. You might have to be a bit more patient, but I think that's the way forward for us.
Yeah, my only observation would be I'm still not convinced we're going to sign a third striker. I mean, with Igor Jesus, I don't think he'd be a tough sign for him to say, I'll come over and be third choice striker. I just wonder if Chris Wood's our Premier League striker, Igor Jesus is our Conference League and Cup striker next season, and then we mix and match and get through it. I don't know. Again, financially, I don't know if we've got space in a budget to spend that much money to carry 3 strikers when we've got other areas of a squad that need enhancing, unless it's a loan or a free transfer. But I agree with what Pete's saying.
I think the ideal scenario probably is that you find someone who is good competition off the bench for those wing places, assuming Elanga and Hudson-Odoi stay, and can play through the middle as well. I mean, those players do exist in the modern game. Often they're players who might play sort of quite a heavy pressing role up front or something like that. They might not necessarily be an out-and-out striker, but somebody who can do a job for us there. I think versatility and having a squad like that is going to be really crucial. If you look back to what Nuno did when he was in Europe with Wolves, he didn't have a squad of 20 players he was using. It was still a squad of 15 or so. But the difference between what we've got and what he had then is that I think the 15 aren't good enough. We've probably got 12 or 13 who are, but really he needs 2 or 3 more who can really, really convince and he can be really confident in. He's not going to want to spread minutes around a massive squad at all. He's going to want quality additions so that we can be sure about that group being tight still, but also being able to perform. And I think versatility is probably the key to that. You look at someone like a Jota, for example, who he had at Wolves. I mean, he can just play anywhere across the front line, and you're not concerned if he's coming off the left or if he's playing on the right or if he's playing through the middle. And I guess that's probably the ideal scenario for us, because is it realistic to have 3 proper number 9s on good money for a club like us? I mean, I'm not even sure many clubs bigger than us do. Well, indeed, yeah. And I mean, the fact with Tayo is that while he's not going to play for a long time, the instinct is to say, right, well, he's not really ours for now. We need another one. We've still got to pay him. There's no way around that, and we've still got to think about the future with or without him. And you have to plan that way. So, yeah, it's not easy. I think versatility is probably the key to some of this stuff.
I think, yeah. Well, while you were talking, I was thinking of names. I mean, Luis Diaz is a left winger who played up front. Pedro Neto did it last season. Son did it the season before for Spurs. Daniel Marlon was like Villa's fill-in striker when Rashford was injured. I think more and more in the current game, this is what teams are doing, and I think it would be sensible for us to have a guy who can play left wing or right wing and play as a striker. Maybe they're not a powerhouse number 9, but that's the direction of direction of the game. Emily, any final words for you on your final appearance before your big day?
No, I don't think so. I think I'm all forested out.
Good. Right. If you've enjoyed this, do us a favour, hit like, hit subscribe. Do consider membership or Patreon subscription. It would be very much appreciated, or just a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. And thanks very much to Nottingham Window Company for being our second sponsors. If you're looking for new windows, new doors, do check out their website. Very good customer service. We had a very minor problem with one of our windows, which was actually my fault. And they came out and fixed it and didn't make me feel like an idiot for doing something stupid. So yeah, I'll vouch for them. Right. We shall throw it to the conversation with Rebecca Watson. But before that, I shall say, Emily Anderson, thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt. Nice to see you, Pete.
Pete Blackburn, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Excited for the weekend. Hope it all goes great.
Thank you.
Yes, good luck to Nick.
Thank
We
you.
shall leave it there with these guys, and then next you shall hear from myself with Forest fan and author Rebecca Watson. Please welcome a journalist, a novelist, and most importantly in the context of this, a Forest fan in Rebecca Watson. Rebecca, good to have you with us. How are you today?
I'm good today. Thanks for having me.
It's great. We were saying before we started recording, Pete Blackburn's a big fan of yours. He's really recommended you to come on here, and I think it'll be a really interesting chat. If Pete's a good judge of character, and I'm sure he is, so we shall get into it. We'll kick us off. We always kick these off when we have these kind of guests who are a bit off piece. Give us your Forest fan story. How did they come into your life?
Yeah, my Forest fan story is maybe slightly unconventional, or at least feels that way to me. And it's either a short story or a long one. But I'll try and kind of I'll kind of pitch in the middle. So I wrote a piece kind of a couple of years ago for The Observer about being a Forest fan, and also about the kind of similarities between football and fiction, which I guess I was thinking about particularly as a writer. And that was a really great moment because suddenly, like, I had lots of sort of Forest fans connecting with me and like having this kind of moment of being like talking about this sort of fandom that I had. And I think it was particularly sort of helpful for me because I'd kind of come to Forest in a slightly roundabout way. So like, I think it's quite a classic story for like some women where like growing up, you don't really have like a team. You're not really encouraged to like necessarily support a team. And, you know, I had plenty of brothers growing up. I've got 3 brothers, but they weren't super into football. And I think also it wasn't really something that you were kind of encouraged to be part of. I also grew up like in the middle of nowhere, so there wasn't a kind of obvious like team to support either. So I grew up with this slight kind of frustration. I enjoyed playing football. I played lots of football. Had to like bribe various boys at school with like gel pens and felt tips to let me play with them. But yeah, I had this like slight kind of hole in my life in terms of like actually having a genuine team rather than being a neutral. And so I kind of like, I think, you know, initially I actually followed another team, which I really shouldn't mention here, which it was a kind of personal joke that I got really like involved in because I was like, oh shit, this is all you have to do. You just start following a team, then they're yours. Great, cool. And so I started getting into that, but then actually like my partner, James, who, you know, I've been with for like 8 years, he's from Nottingham, is best mates with Forest Focus finest Pete Blackburn. So like I kind of naturally picked up Forest from James, which kind of came from like, you know, obviously being interested anyway, and then actually just becoming more and more invested and it becoming more and more my own thing. And I tell that story in this kind of slightly roundabout and slightly indirect way, because when I say the story of, you know, well, I took my boyfriend's team, that always feels so kind of insufficient. It feels like it doesn't tell the story for me of what Forest means to me. But that's essentially it.
So the other team I know was Watford. We'll have to out you, I'm afraid, on that. So supporting 2 clubs is normally a no-no. Have you retained your Watford interest, or has that died off during the years?
So with Watford, I guess like they're not like my team. Like my kind of connection to Watford is like I initially was a personal joke, and now I just kind of like follow them. So like I'm interested in like what happens with them. I wouldn't have the same level of knowledge about them. I wouldn't be able to tell you about all of their players and like game by game always how things were going. But I just have a kind of slight curiosity about them. But then I guess in the same way that like you kind of follow lots of other teams just to see like what's going on. And I quite like having a foot in the championship, because if you just follow a team, i.e. like you just sort of see how they're doing week by week, you do have a sense of like what the other leagues are like, how it's going there. Because like with the move to the Premier League, like suddenly you're so aware of what's happening in the Premier League, but your kind of access to everything else around that sort of starts to diminish a bit.
Yeah, that is true. I lost total interest in the championship. In fact, I watched one championship game last season. It was the playoff final, and it was great. But you do lose that connection. Certainly, I've got more of a connection with where I grew up in, like Shrewsbury for League One, and Burton, where I used to work for League One as well. So I hear that. I mean, how many Forest games are you able to get to? If you're, this is a snobbish assumption. I'm assuming you're London based, and you might not be.
Well, you are correct, so that's okay. Yeah, I mean, it's more trying to get into the games than actually, be it like traveling. I'm happy to travel, but I mean, I've been to a few. I mean, it was helpful. The FA Cup semi-final at Wembley. Obviously, I could go to that. Although, to be fair, that was actually surprisingly upbeat for losing 2-0 against City. And I went to that lackluster Wolves draw at the City Ground at the end of August last year. And so, yeah, I've been to the City Ground a few times, and it's always just as you expect it to be, just like dramatically communal and jubilant.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of what I was going to ask around football. We all love it for different reasons. I guess for me, it's obviously the sport, but also kind of what the collective can do for you and being part of something, and how you feel after a win, and all that kind of thing. That I think I've lost a bit of reading too much about PSR and talking about VAR, but I do remember why football's good. I mean, why is it good for you?
It's good for me for so many reasons. I mean, that community feeling is so fundamental, and was something that was the kind of click, with like starting to support Forest, and certainly having this thing of like not just being a team that I care about, but like the people around it that I know and love who are supporting Forest as well, and what it is to kind of communally support a team. I think, like, for me as a writer, I'm really struck by like the space for imagination that exists in football. Like, so much of what you're experiencing is a kind of storytelling. Like you yourself as a spectator are animating the sport. There's a similarity there between football and in fiction, in that like the last sort of paint stroke of like the book or like the football game is you adding the kind of charge to it. So there's this kind of, as a spectator in football, there's this charge of possibility where what you're watching is simultaneously what's happening, but also what might happen, what isn't happening, what you're imagining could happen. So there's this kind of bizarre sort of double narrative, two parallel tracks that are constantly alongside each other. And I think that is kind of an extraordinary thing. That quality of like unknown, and the kind of buzz of the fact that like you can't sort of trust your hunch on what's going to happen. Like, things could always change. It's kind of the charge of like present tense life, the possibility of anything happening at any moment, and you're experiencing that with many people around you simultaneously feeling that same charge. It's kind of electric.
So I was going to ask you about, and I'm not entirely sure how they're completely related, but some of your work has been adapted into a play. It's been, in theatres. So you'll have been in the audience, and I'm sure that's a buzz. Which is it comparable with football in the sense of being an audience and something thrilling? I guess is it in a way, is it totally different because you know what happens in your work and you know everything that's coming? But is that a different kind of buzz?
Well, there's definitely something there though, because like, so for my first novel, Little Scratch, was adapted into a play, and obviously usually my experience of having my work read by other people and experienced by other people is entirely separate. So I have no sense live of how someone is reacting to what I've created. I might be told an impression afterwards, I might read a review, I might whatever, but the sense of like the work happening and someone live experiencing it suddenly became something I could experience by seeing the play adaptation. And there were things like, jokes in the book that were then translated into the play, and hearing an audience like laugh at it and being like, oh, okay, yeah, so we get that one, we like that one. And, but it's not just that. And I think the kind of connection between, say, a football audience, like spectators, and a theatre audience, is that you don't have to hear a reaction to like feel something within a crowd. Like in a crowd, you're kind of held by this kind of collective feeling where you somehow know whether everyone is still on the edge of their seats anticipating something, or whether they're sitting back and feeling like, oh, like the deflation of like nothing's going to happen. There's just this kind of weird ability to collectively feel an emotion, and that exists in both spaces, and is kind of a kind of weird kind of intuition that we can have as an audience member.
How much discipline does it take to write a novel? My wife is off and on at me to write books, and I say I haven't. Well, it would take too long, and I don't think I could do it. Yeah, even if potentially it could be, successful or whatever. I don't think it would be.
Like as a writer, to a degree, like although I have to work hard, and for example, like my latest novel took me like 5 years and 5 drafts, so like that's a decent amount of time in which I'm working very carefully, very dedicatedly to making it good, to making it work. But yeah, I mean it sounds like you should just write a book, doesn't it? I mean, like I think ultimately the answer to this question is really just like me being like, it's time, do it.
How do you know when it's done? 5 years, 5 drafts. There must be a point where you can tinker relentlessly to the point you make it worse. It must be a big decision, and it could probably drive you a bit mental, couldn't it, deciding when it's actually done?
Yeah, it's difficult because there's not a kind of objective point. It purely comes, at least for me, from like intuition. I just know, and I will keep working until the point where I think, oh, I'm done with this. It's finished. Like, I guess like you're not working towards a state of kind of objective perfection. You're working towards a state of, this has reached what I imagined. So that is something that is more like felt rather than kind of being able to compare it against something, or, finally be able to sort of tick everything off and be like, okay, cool, I've finally done it. But because it is intuition, it's a feeling of, okay, this is now ready. It means you have no sense of timeline. So within the time when you're writing, it's enraging, and sometimes quite daunting, because you don't know, that those 5 years could have been 15. Hopefully that's not what the next one will be.
A couple of pure football questions, although it will link back to your work and your mindset. When you reflect on last season, how do you view it? Is there ever a danger, because of your job, that you over-intellectualize it and think too much about, what is just a football match and a series of 38 results? But how do you reflect on last season?
I feel I probably don't. I'm probably not in danger of intellectualizing it. I feel too much, so I sort of descend into the emotions too much when it comes to Forest. I feel like there's kind of two camps with last season. Although perhaps people are now kind of sort of slightly coming out of the intensity of the emotions that they were in when the season ended. But like you either hold the feeling of being like, at the beginning of the season, I would never have imagined that this would be possible. And if you can hold that feeling, then you can leave the season being like, we did amazing. If you can't hold that feeling, then the fact that we didn't get the Champions League, that we finished 7th when it felt possible to be higher than that, then I feel like it's sort of more sour and harder to kind of push that away. But for me, I felt like I was so proud and so kind of amazed by what had happened, and thinking not even about like having doubled our points tally and having been so firmly in the upper half, which would have felt, even the idea of aiming for the top half would have felt insane. But like just thinking about stuff like that Brighton win when we won like 7-0, just like even the possibility of that before the season started would have felt like someone was like having a laugh. So yeah, I feel like we built such a kind of psychological stability, I think, this season, There's a kind of integrity and a stability to the team that I find so encouraging. Obviously, kind of it felt like it was sort of tapering off or becoming kind of exhausted, hitting a kind of wall near the end. But I still feel like that's something that's been built that endures and that we can kind of work on for next season.
So looking at next season then, do you feel like this was a building block and we'll kick on from here, or do you worry it was a one season wonder and it'll all fall apart?
Well, yeah, the problem with football is like, you can't predict it, and whatever feels kind of comfortably true is just going to be entirely like upturned. I feel like, psychology in football is fundamental, and is so much a question of how people sustain results. I feel like we've worked really well on psychology, and the sense of our team, a sense of kind of our relationship to each other, the players' relationships to each other and to the manager and stuff, that feels so solid that feels like a base to genuinely work on and move forwards from. I worry, like for example, with Morgan Gibbs-White, I worry about him going, not just for my own emotional turmoil, although that will be great, but because he feels like such a kind of stable. He feels like a kind of emblem of Forest to me. Him and like Murillo feel like really good examples of what Forest are more generally. Murillo's kind of reliability and stability. I think for like Morgan Gibbs-White, like he's such a kind of enabler. He's so nimble, and he's kind of stylish but like not showy. There are so many of these kind of qualities in those two players that feel to me like Forest's like means of playing, that the idea of them departing does make me feel kind of slightly anxious.
Last question then. If I offered you 12th place and we win the Conference League, or you're going to take that, aren't you?
I think I'm going to take it, yeah.
What if I said 12th place and the final of the Conference League? But you don't know if you win or lose. Yeah.
I mean, like ultimately, I mean, perhaps it's like a bit pathetic, but I think I would take it. But I think also this is more like my approach to betting. Like I'm taking security. Give me security now. I can go into the season knowing that I have that. But actually, maybe I'll change my mind on that. Maybe actually I won't take anything, because like part of the joy of all this is like watching it entirely unfold, and not knowing what's going to happen. And maybe it'll be a hard season. Maybe we'll have to learn from that. But like, we're in with Forest for eternity, not for the good seasons. So
that's a good note to end on. We are in it for eternity. There is no escape. That's true. If people want to find out more about your work, or get hold of your stuff, where can they do that? Well, tell us about your work.
Well, maybe just go to my website, which is www.rebeccawatson.co.uk, which has all the stuff about my various novels. But yeah, novels available in all good bookshops as well.
Good, and bad ones as well, I'm sure.
Of course, yeah.
Good stuff. That's it for today. Thanks to Pete, thanks to Emily, and thanks to Rebecca. Thanks to you for your company. Do us a favour and hit like and subscribe on this video if you haven't already, or just a lovely review on Apple or Spotify or whatever podcast platform you are listening on. Do join us tomorrow for the quiz, as mentioned by Pete. That is myself, Mark, Greg, and Fothers in a handicap match versus Temps, Mikey, and Chris, with Pete, Dan, and Paul in charge of the questions and hosting. It was good fun recording it last night, and I think you'll enjoy it, so do check that out. But if you don't, thanks for your company, and if we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.